2024 coverage. We're just a little more than a month away from the Iowa caucus. Today, Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis talked to reporters about the race.
As 6 News' Joe Harris reports, DeSantis says that he is not worried by a recent Iowa poll showing him trailing Donald Trump by a wide margin.
Thank you.
Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is still more than 30 percentage points behind former President Donald Trump. With the first GOP contest just weeks away, DeSantis says he doesn't put much stock in those polls.
Trump was supposed to run away with the caucus in 2016. He didn't win it. Other folks in 2012, Santorum won. He was so far behind, but at the beginning of December. You had the same thing in 2008. So this is just what happens.
He believes support from Reynolds and Iowa evangelical leader Bob Vanderplatz will carry him through the caucus night.
When you have those types of folks supporting you, it really comes with an organization that can help turn out the vote for you.
Bellevue University political science professor Dr. Rick Galusha says there is some merit to what DeSantis is saying.
Polling increasingly is less reliable. And so those who are in the political game get good at guesstimating or getting a temperature for the room. I don't think that Ron DeSantis has much of an opportunity to make up ground in Iowa, but he is hopeful.
DeSantis says he has the ability to attract enough conservative votes to beat Trump in a primary, something he says opponent Nikki Haley lacks.
It's a great night in New Hampshire.
But Galusha says Haley appears to be gaining momentum at this time.
When we look at polling in terms of the nation, 3 out of 4 voters do not want to vote for either President Biden or Donald Trump. And so they're definitely looking for viable options. Is Ron DeSantis that option? I have my doubts.
DeSantis also took the opportunity to say Trump has moved further to the left. He cited the former president's recent tweet celebrating a Black Lives Matter advocate's endorsement and his proposal to build 10 futuristic freedom cities on undeveloped federal land.
Clearly, he added a lot to the debt while he was president, but now to be proposing a massive amount of new spending to create new cities, I think is just, something that doesn't make any sense.
But Galusha says whether Trump appears to be moving left is irrelevant here.
Donald Trump has never taken a strong party position, talked about the party platform. And in fact, it sounds to me as though what he's trying to do is reach across party lines and grab onto minority voters because they seem to be responding to him increasingly.
On your side, Joe Harris, 6 News.
The professor goes on to say Iowa is unpredictable, so it's best to wait and see what Iowans do or say.